That's a good little 2-minute story no one got to hear.
Look, man, it's like when you're building a car. There's a shakedown period.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
And if anybody is listening or tuning in right now, you can see us on YouTube, on Twitch. If you have a Twitch, we would love for you to go and check out our channel. It's over at Boost Booze BBQ. That's where we're going to have all the automotive-related stuff, Boost Booze and Barbecue, Horsepower Hour. Might even put Small Batch over there because I know you drift guys. You like your libations.
Oh, yeah, we do.
Cheers
definitely,
to that.
Definitely cheers to that.
All right, we got the thumbs up, the green light, son.
All right, let's start this.
3, 2, 1, go.
Welcome to Clutch Kick Radio with Ryan Lackner.
Rylac.
What's up?
How you doing, boss?
Good. How about you?
Good, man. So we're talking about the early days of Oregon Drift today.
Yeah, definitely. And I definitely have to start off with saying I have owned a 240 for way too long. And I'm sure many other people will understand. But so I'm driving here today, and it's pretty hot. It's 80-ish degrees out. And about 5 minutes into my drive, I'm sitting there, both windows all the way down, just sweating like, man, it's hot. And then I look down and I'm like, oh yeah, this is a completely bone stock S14 that everything works in. So I quickly rolled the windows up and turned the AC on. It was weird. I've never experienced that in a 240.
You've definitely been in 240s too long.
Yeah. And I have to mention too, it's funny because it's something I really, really enjoy, but I don't know if I'm just getting punished for it or not, because S13s and S14s have clocks in the gauge cluster, which is kind of weird because I feel like not a lot of cars have an actual just clock, and it's literally just a digital clock in the gauge cluster. And I feel like 9 times out of 10, I'm just looking at that like, oh my gosh, I'm so late. Like I should have left already. And I feel like it's just punishing me the whole time.
That's a very drifter thing to do. I mean, Coy has story after story after story of showing up at your guys' house and like, it's the night before a big drift event. You've got the subframe out of the car.
Oh yeah. I remember those days. Coy be like, oh, you guys, yeah, we're going to the drift event. I'll be there in an hour. Be like, all right, we'll be here. And Coy shows up like thinking we're going to be packed, like ready to put back a few beers, hang out. And then we'll go to no, there's like 2 motors sitting on the floor, suspension over here. And we're like, oh yeah, this motor just died. So now we're going to do this. And of course he was always down to help and all that, but it was always funny because he would always show up like, all right, you guys ready? Never once were we ready. Someone in our group for sure was falling behind and we were picking them up. That's for sure.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's what it's all about, right? That's the whole drifter, like camaraderie and all that. It's y'all help each other. Everyone helps each other, and it's a good time.
Well, that's true. And I mean, even let's say you were drag racing, a lot of those drag race guys, they'll bring an extra motor, extra transmission. Like, I'm thinking about, the hot rod crews. What is that called? They drive like 3,000 miles across the country.
The Gumball 3000. Or are you talking the, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I can't remember the name of it. Anyways, it doesn't matter. This is a drift show. But those guys they'll have their little trailer. And, some of the OGs with the super fast cars, they don't bring any spare parts. And then the guys that are just doing the cruise for the first time, they'll have the bigger trailer because they don't have the same, their setup is not as well sorted. I mean, they're changing stuff, rear ends, we rolled through this town and we lost a cylinder, but it turns out that Texas Speed and Performance is here, so whipped out the credit card and bought a long block, just stuff like that.
Yeah, it's
super funny to see stuff like that. And I would say that drifters not quite there, but I've seen some pretty hairy stuff.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I still look back on the days when we would drive to PGP. I mean, I think it's 2.5, 3 hours to PGP. And I'm driving my SR20 240. We drove all the way there, drove 6 hours on the track, and drove all the way home. I mean, it's insane. And there's a lot of people that did that back in that day because, I mean, none of us could afford trailers or anything like that. We were just doing what we could just to make it to the track, let alone make it there reliably, I guess.
Well, and an SR at relatively stock power levels is pretty reliable.
Yeah, I think it probably helped us back in that day. I think if you tried to do that now with some of the cars with the power they make and some of the, builds I've seen out there, I feel like it'd be a little different, but I don't know. I mean, technology's improved a lot too, and you see a lot more reliable drift cars out there than there used to be even at 300 plus horse. So it's kind of, and then they had the drift week, and so they, like, all those guys pretty much made it through. I think there was
drag week. That's what we were trying to.
Drag week.
The hot rod drag week. Yep.
So the drift week, I think there was one guy that blew a motor in the C6 Corvette, but that was like a car he bought, came over and like never really drove it until he came here. So yeah, I mean, they seem to be pretty reliable. Matt Field drove his C6 all the way there the whole time and back, never really had much for problems in that thing. So.
Well, Corvettes are going to be on the menu soon because you're finishing one up right now.
Oh, yeah.
But today we're talking about the early days of Oregon drifting. And I'll tell you what, man, you're a good one to talk about it because you've been there since the relative beginning. Yeah,
so I definitely have been there a long time, since the beginning. 2009, summer of 2009 is when I started drifting. I had a buddy, Jordan Lindblom. I would always hang out with him after school. He worked at a little coffee shop, and so I would always stop by there, and he had like one of the cleanest, coolest like S14s I've ever seen at the time. And back then you didn't see a lot of 240s, at least around. And so I was just like, I didn't even know what drifting was, and he didn't even tell me what drifting was. I just remember he was always like, oh man, 240s are the best thing on earth, you got to get one. And like, that was basically it. And then for some reason I decided, all right, I need a 240 in my life. And so I traded a Honda Accord for one and never looked back. And I've had a 240 since then, since 2009. So,
man, that blows my mind. Sometimes I wish I'd started in a 240 instead of being, I don't know, some kind of a weird 80s turbo Mazda guy, but
Yeah, but I feel like there's it's all about who you are and where you grew up. And I think that's probably like one of the best parts about drifting now is there's so many people that are into it. And there's a lot of guys that were like into other things that are now into drifting. And I think it brings a big, like, I don't know, I guess not change of pace, but it brings a lot of diversity into the drifting community, as far as like builds and like what you can do and this and that, and I think that really has helped progress things and show people kind of more of what you can do and what you can't,
Most definitely.
And I think it just makes it easier to go out there and build all those things because you got guys before you at least doing it and guys out there who are willing to help now, whereas when we started in 2009, it was like, what's drifting? There wasn't a whole lot for us to look after other than like, Japan drifting and all of that. But, there wasn't a whole lot of like, hey, you want to drift? Okay, I'll come here and I'll teach you, Whereas a lot of the kids nowadays, they kind of have that. There's a lot of us out there that have been drifting long enough and are so passionate about it that we are willing to teach people and pass the knowledge along that we know and whatever, because drifting's awesome. There's nothing better you can do in a car. Ever since I drifted the first time, it was just, that's all I ever wanted to do.
I remember one time meeting a guy who had a second gen Supra, and I was, 16, 17 years old. I mean, I was pretty young, a couple years younger than you, but then again, I'm older than you. And this was the first time I ever heard about drifting was, and this dude was legit like mid 30s, and he had this second gen Supra, and it was lowered and the wide wheels and all that good stuff. And I was into cars at that point, but as a younger kid is into cars, so like the Lamborghinis and the Ferraris and stuff like that. And he started telling me about how he slides on the back roads, and I didn't understand it until a few years later, where I was like, oh, drifting, okay, interesting.
Well, I mean, let's be fair, you and Coy both, even at the beginning of, I would say, even me drifting, when I first started hanging out with Coy and met Coy, it was like, oh, you guys are dumb, drifting stupid. Oh, drifters are dumb, and all that. And it's just funny because now, I mean, drifting has grown so much and it's so crazy. I mean, I get it. Everyone was, I mean, that's how anything that new is, right? I mean, everyone hates on stuff that's new. So,
well, here's the thing. Drifting wasn't dumb for you because you got to where you were good at it. Everybody else we knew that tried to drift, all they did was brag about wrecking. That was it.
Yeah.
I remember specifically, I was in autocross, and there was a dude there that was trying to drift, and he was in an AE86 Corolla, and couldn't drift to save his life. Just absolutely could not. And I remember at one point, he understeered basically into a curb, into a sidewalk, you know? And then, I don't know how to describe this. This is MySpace days, okay? We're scrolling through MySpace, and this was back when you all shared one computer, and you'd all look at it at once. I know, it sounds
You had
really...
to unplug the phone to plug the computer in.
It might have been something like that. But this dude had posted a photo of him drifting, and it was the wheels were at opposite lock. He was looking the opposite direction. And I looked at it, and I was like, I remember that. I know exactly where that is. And smoke's coming off of the front tires. And I was like, he wasn't drifting. He slid right into that curb. And so we just hazed him on MySpace.
Yeah, typical.
So, I mean, part of the reason why Coy and I were just like, oh, drifting, it's so dumb, is because the only people we knew that were in it at that point were those dudes there. Like a guy that had
they were
slid,
the typical drifters.
Right, exactly. A guy that had slid into a parked car downtown Salem. A guy who had slid his car into a curb at an autocross, a guy who had just put his car into a ditch, another kid with a front-wheel drive car that said he was a drifter. I mean, that was all we knew about it.
Yeah. Oh, and I don't blame you at all, because I even hated those people at that same time. I was like, no, I'm not one of those people, and I feel like that's probably why we're still friends, to be honest, right?
Well, of course, you were never one of those people.
But, yeah, I think what threw a lot of people off back in that day, I think, was the fact that there was nowhere to learn. There wasn't a lot of people to teach. And at that time, as we'll get much more into this in more episodes, the street teams, you know, they were around at that time. And for a lot of people that don't know, the street teams were like all these just groups of people that were drifters from different areas, and they had their teams or whatever, you know, that they would drift with, and they were street teams. And I think a lot of people who weren't a part of those street teams, they got turned off by it, and they were, I don't know, they got looked down on and whatever. They were kind of the driftards, you know, the ones Andy's talking about.
Yes.
And so, you know, and we all know who those people are.
Yeah.
But, you know, I think it threw a lot of people off, but I just think that now drifting is so much more accessible, and there's so much more of it, and it's, there's more people to teach it, you know, and so I think it's just easier to get into it, and I think it's easier to show up at PARC, you know, not knowing what's going on when there's not 3 street teams that are the only ones there at that track, you know, and then you feel like you're left out or whatever. So,
right.
I mean, don't get me wrong, there's still teams and there's still groups of people and whatever, you know, you're going to hang out with your friends and whatnot, of course, but I think that like predominantly street teams more or less running it is not the way it is anymore. And I think that helps grow it all and bring more people in.
For a little while there, street teams were almost like mini gangs, you know?
Oh yeah.
Not minus like the only thing you really were doing illegal was, you know, obviously the street racing and street drifting and stuff like that.
In Mexico.
Allegedly. We were doing that in Mexico.
Yes.
Yeah. But you know, you're right. Where are you going to learn how to do something like that? I think that's where a lot of the farm road switchbacks came in handy. You know?
Definitely.
Here in Oregon, we have a lot of those where it's a 90 degree and then a 90 degree because it's following these old property lines of like farms, you know? And so you end up having these kind of perfect on camber.
Yeah, 20-mile-an-hour S corners, 15-mile-an-hour S corners, and you can hit them once on your way through and leave. I mean, I'm not saying you should do that, but
back in the day, a person could if they were so inclined.
Yeah, and I mean, we're talking you're in the middle of the country. There's one house sitting on that corner, and by the time they would even think about calling anyone, you would probably be gone.
If there even was a house there.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, there are quite a few roads that we allegedly know of in those certain parts of the Mexico portion of Oregon. But that was not a bad place to learn for you guys because a lot of those corners were first gear, a lot of them middle of nowhere, a lot of them no cars around. You could see headlights from way away.
Oh, yeah, from half mile plus, you could always see headlights, and we had radios, spotters. You know, we did it the safe way. And back then there was no venues to go to. At that point, it was either we drove 3.5 hours to Washington or we didn't get a drift. Right. So we drifted, how we needed to. And the thing that ended up leading to was a guy who came in named Slater, and he started running events up at Hoodoo. And so at that time we were, street team, this and that. And so we decided, okay, let's go check out these events, because we didn't know what it was all about. We didn't know who was going or any of that. And we ended up showing up, and it was probably one of the best times I've ever had. Best 2 days. You could go up there. There was plenty of room to camp. You could camp, and it was a 2-day drift event. Mm-hmm. And just this huge, big open parking lot. Now, it doesn't seem as big to me now, as it did back then. It's still a large parking lot that would be a ton of fun to go back to. Mm-hmm. But at that time, I mean, that was the biggest chunk of pavement I've ever got to sit there and stare at and just be like, oh, okay, I can just go do whatever I want out here. And at first, that's how it started. They were like, okay, you had to do like your little qualifications or whatever. And so they would go out and they'd be like, okay, go out and do a couple donuts and figure eights. And if you do that and don't spin out, then you can kind of go do what you want on the track. Mm-hmm. And so, the first couple times it was that way. We were kind of under the gun. It was really weird. It was like, until this point, we had only drifted with our friends and whatever. And then, now we're sitting here getting judged by all these people. Like, if you're not good enough, you're not allowed on this piece of pavement, and that was a really big deal back then. And I think that is also partially what kind of scared some people away at the time. It was pretty scary. I mean, being that age and whatnot, just trying to impress all these other people that are older than you and that have been doing this longer and all this stuff. I mean, it was definitely crazy. That's for sure.
Yeah, but have they been doing it longer than you? And did they actually have more experience? That's the thing. You guys might have been young, but I do feel like you ended up being one of the better drifters out there early on because you just did it so much.
Yeah, I think all of our friends can attest to this, that there was definitely times that I remember Kyle Stryker specifically getting on the radio and saying, hey, you should probably let your car cool down. You've been driving for 45 minutes straight. And I'm like, really? And he's like, yeah, and I'm like, well, my car's not hot. And he's like, just let your car cool down. You've been driving for 45 minutes. Just give it a break, and that was me. I was out there from the time the track opened until the time, it all shut down. Mm-hmm. And with that stock SR, you didn't overheat. You didn't, nothing. You just drive all day.
The thing that I liked about Hoodoo was, like you said, that big wide open pad, but having the ability to just do anything you wanted and not worry about, wrecking into something,
exactly,
spinning out. That was enormously beneficial to some of you early drift guys.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's now, don't get me wrong, this is not a negative comment by any means towards PARC or anything, but I think that is the only thing that PARC is missing. Mm-hmm. Because back in that day, especially when we were still learning and advancing and growing and all that, like, because I think when we first went there, like, they were better drifters than us. They knew more, they knew all that because they had been doing it longer. But quickly, I think we caught up and passed them, is what happened. But, oh, I forgot.
Well, does anybody know what happened to that first original, street team that started at Pat's Acres?
Oh, yeah, there's a lot of that goes around with that. I mean, don't
get yourself in trouble.
No, but the way that it went down is a video had come out and we had all watched it, and it was them. It was Slater driving at PARC, and no one had ever gotten to drive at PARC, and we'd always heard about it. We'd always wondered, and it was just a video of him driving there. And I remember that it went out into the community, and I think that was back in the forum days. Mm-hmm. Interesting days.
Very
wild days. Mm-hmm. But he put out a message that said, if you want to drive at PARC for this first event, you have to show up to Hoodoo on this day, and you have to qualify, blah, 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 whatever, and be good enough that you can go to PARC, because you cannot go off track. At that time, it was a 0 off track tolerance, period. No going off track at all. And so Yeah, it was crazy. I was like, whoa, okay, well, let's do this. And I remember at that time, we had just blown up my KAT on the dyno. Big surprise. Yeah, everyone told me it was going to happen.
With your
it
shirt
did.
that said KAT Power.
Yeah, so a week from this event at Hoodoo, I looked at Kyle and I was like, what are we going to do? And he's like, well, you better find a motor because at that time, the other thing that he had put out there was that this was the only 30 people that was going to get a drive at this track for an entire year. So, and not only that, Hoodoo, there was no more.
I'm not trying to talk crap about anybody, but that sounds a little megalomaniac-ish.
Yeah, it was really interesting. I don't know. And so more or
like,
less,
I control your destiny kind of a thing. It's just so...
Yeah, it was. And it honestly felt that way, but what are you going to do? There
Well,
was nowhere else to
nothing.
drive. I mean,
Yeah.
So I went and got a motor. We drove all the way down to Medford and picked up a motor from a guy down there. So thankful that he was a legit guy. Always been super cool. He's been in the drift community for a long time. His name is Terry Cable. And that motor, I beat the living crap out of it for like a year and a half, and it did nothing but run and love it. So I got lucky there. But so we drove down there, got that motor, and I think that I didn't sleep for almost 2.5 days as we were pulling my blown up motor, swapping everything over, just doing the full SR swap that I'd never done before. That was my first SR swap.
Yeah.
And we more or less did it in about 3 days.
That wasn't the CA18, huh?
No. That came after. That was after I pulled the SR.
Oh, I gotcha. Okay.
Yeah. That was a moneymaker whole deal. But anyways, so we spent 3 days putting this motor in, got it running, more or less, bled everything out of the car, did all of our checks, and we loaded everything up and we drove to Hoodoo on Friday, like the day after we got it running. So, and then there's definitely going to be some pictures up there of it.
Well, there's
S13.
Hoodoo as we speak.
Yep, there was Hoodoo.
Mm-hmm.
Of the black S13 with a red front end, no front end. I didn't even have a single front end panel on the car, none of that. And it was just like, we barely made it. I remember I didn't have a downpipe, an SR downpipe, and the one he gave me was broken. And so we literally had to trailer my car to my work. I worked at an automotive shop at that time on that Friday morning, and we spent maybe 3 or 4 hours making an entire turbo elbow, downpipe, and full exhaust for my car just to go to Hoodoo. And then that's when we drove all the way there. So I think we left sometime mid-afternoon or something like that to drive all the way up to Hoodoo. Spent the night there that night, and then we were there 2 days drifting, and I didn't have a single problem.
Holy smokes. That's
yeah,
crazy.
It's like that. I feel like it's so lucky. I don't know how some of the stuff we did, we got away with it, but I mean, we're here today, so.
And Devin Gibson, of course, says, rip Hoodoo.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I'm hoping that by talking about this and keep mentioning it and how awesome it was, that maybe we can either get Hoodoo back again or find somewhere else like that, because I really think that that's something that's needed, somewhere that you can go out and you can do donuts and figure eights. And that was the best part about Hoodoo is you could do all these things that you always thought about in your head and that I wanted to do and try and all this, but you don't want to try those things at PARC, and you don't want to try those things on the street at the time, because you don't want to wreck your car and you don't know exactly what's going to happen in this and that. But when you're in a big open parking lot, you can throw the car as hard as you want just to see what it'll do.
Right, exactly.
And I think that really helps, in the car control, because you can really just try things.
It makes safer drifters at the end of the day.
I think so. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then, it's also a great place for people to start who want to go out and learn. They can go out and that happened at Hoodoo. There were guys and there were gals there that would go out and they would do maybe 3-4 minutes of a donut or a figure eight, and then they would come off track and let someone else go have their turn. And that was fine. That was sweet. It was awesome seeing everyone learning and all that. And I know a lot of people got turned off by that and, ended up walking away a little bit, but it was the best thing ever. I loved all that. I loved watching everyone learn and go through the growing pains of it all. It's because I was there and I did it all in the same way.
Mm-hmm. I don't know how else you're going to do it. And it goes right back around to what you said. I mean, just the fact that there was any track time.
Oh, yeah.
That's what was necessary.
Yep. And that is, I think the just being able to go out and just drive for hours and hours and hours, it really changes things, because at the end of the day, it is really seat time. I mean, you can spend as much money as you want on a car, but it doesn't mean you can drive it.
Well, so what happened then? I mean, Hoodoo lost. The fella that lost Hoodoo for us also, was the person doing the PARC thing, and then that all evaporated, and then all of a sudden, there's this power vacuum. We know that we can do drift at Pat's Acres.
Yep.
But the person who had originally organized it is now MIA.
Yep.
What is your thought process then?
So, kind of how that went a little bit. I'll give a little backstory into that. So I got approached by someone that was in their group, and I got told that the guy who was the organizer and running the event, Slater, was not going to do this next event, and he had planned on not telling anyone. And from my understanding, he was even told that they should probably not tell anyone or whatever, because I assume he wanted to get out before people found out and got mad at him, or whatever the case was, because at that point there was no other drifting in Oregon. And if he left, I mean, you're now hated by every drifter in Oregon. Let's be real here. And so when I got approached, I didn't know what to do. So me and Kyle Stryker and some of our buddies at the time with our street team started talking about it, and we decided that we would just run the events. So me and Kyle went to Chris at Pat's Acres and pretty much explained the whole situation to him. Hey, this guy's not going to show up. He's not going to tell you this and that. And Chris was hopeful and said, okay, give me a day or two, see if I can contact him. He couldn't contact him. And so we came in and started running the events to keep it going. And that right there, I think, was 100% out of necessity. Were any of us capable of probably managing that whole thing and all of that, how it exploded? No, probably not. But there was no other option. I mean, it was either step up or don't get a drift. And we all looked at each other and it was like, look, we have to have somewhere to drift. We can't do this anywhere else, and we can't afford to go drive all these places. So let's take on these events. And so we did that for a while, and then, things happened in that group, and we stopped running events, and we just eventually talked to Chris and said, hey, you're the owner of the track. At the end of the day, you make the rules. And I think that it would be better just staffed by you. And that's pretty much what happened. And honestly, that was probably the best thing that ever happened for PARC. And since then, it has just exploded and grown so exponentially.
Yeah, it is the best thing that could have happened. He it's his track, like you said. He knows how to run races. That means he knows how to run events like these. And so you guys, I think probably part of it is just you showed him the viability of it. And then when you said, hey, we really don't have the time to do this anymore, we want you to run them, that just seems like a no-brainer to me after seeing the viability that you guys brought.
Yeah, and I mean, at that time, you had a steady, I don't remember exactly how many drivers we had at that time, but I'm pretty sure it was a solid 30, 40 drivers all the time. We were packing every event to the max every time. And even at that, even slow days, you'd have a rain day or like a slightly cold day or whatever, and you would just have like a shift in people of who you would have there. You just have lower horsepower cars that would stay out there longer rather than higher horsepower turbo cars, but it always was packed. And so it was kind of one of those things where it was like, look, don't let this go away. This is a good thing. This is a good thing for all of us. This is what we've all been working for and hoping for years, and so don't let it go away. And luckily, he didn't. And he stuck with us, and he stuck with the drifting community. And, now we have what we have at PARC, and it is absolutely amazing.
And he went through that kind of interesting cycle where at first, you were allowed on track, but there were rules. And then you had sort of like an audition that you had to go through. And then he implemented like a drift license, How old's the sticker system now?
What do you mean
in the window?
Oh, I'm not sure.
I think that's only a couple 3 years old, but 5-6 years ago, I remember people going and doing their tryouts, quote unquote. And that was an interesting juxtaposition to me, because you had these people who really knew what they were doing and were familiar with that track. And then you had people who had never drifted before. They didn't want to risk doing it on the street. And so they needed some place to go, some place to come to. And so literally their first experience drifting anything was on the Pat's Acres track, trying to get that first corner down to where they could first gear slide it, you know? And it was such an interesting, it was an interesting thing to watch for someone like me who'd been in motorsports for years. And I'm sure it was kind of fascinating for you being in drift for years, because you're seeing these newcomers and their very first experience is on-track experience.
Yeah, I really commend everyone who had to do that, because I luckily did not have to have my first experiences on PARC, but I can justify with some people a little bit. Yeah, just go out there and do it. Who cares? No one out there cares. No one's going to make fun of you. It's all good. No, everyone has to start somewhere. But I can see it, like if that was me today and I had to go out there first time on track, and you're sitting there at the line, and not only that, like, people don't realize the elevation change. Once again, I mean, you're sitting there on a track that looks fairly small, and now you're out there on a track you've never driven, and you're staring down the front straight, and you're looking, and it dips a little bit, and then you're gonna turn, and it's also banked a little bit, and you see tons of people fly off and all this, and so I could see it being very intimidating, to have to try to learn there. And I mean, how does everyone else learn? How do we learn? I started doing donuts, then I started doing figure eights, then I started kind of linking things and doing corners and this and that. And these people don't necessarily have that. They just have to go out and try it on a track.
Yep. I don't know what quality of driver that's going to produce. I mean, time will tell. I'm sure we could see right now. I'm sure someone who really went to every event.
That's what it changes. The one thing that I noticed that changes the most is people who learned on the street. You have a huge anticipation for what's coming in front of you and how to adjust for different weird situations, because you deal with so much weird stuff on the street. Whereas when you go to a track, and it's not always the case. I mean, you can learn either way and you can get to the same point either way, but sometimes you have a higher learning curve on the street just because of the anticipation. When you go into a track, you can literally look at like a solid point and be like, okay, I'm going to do this right here every time until it turns out perfect, and then I'll try to get this. And so you don't have as much anticipation there. You're just kind of doing the same thing. You know what I mean? And I mean, everyone, you still get there either way. You can still learn it, and I still feel like you can be just as good of a drifter either way, but I feel like how you learn changes things about how you drift, and it is more like how it changes your style, I guess.
Yeah, I understand that. Hey, we've got some pretty cool looking videos, by the way, that I wanted to get into here pretty soon. Producer Nick, I don't know what order these are in. Why don't you go ahead and pull up the first one?
Nope, not that one. Next one. Yep, that's the order they should go in. You just did it backwards. So first, middle, last. Yep. So this here is the SRT4, Jolene's SRT4 autocrossing up at Hoodoo. And I just wanted to show this video because I wanted to be able to show, I don't know of any drifting videos from Hoodoo. I think at that time, if I remember right, the only videos out there were like cell phone videos. And I don't even know if any of those exist anymore. So I wanted to kind of,
they're going to be quality that's like,
oh yeah, it's going to be a potato.
Low,
yeah, potato phone for sure. Your old flip phone, videos. Anyway, so this is her doing autocross, and I just wanted to kind of show how big the parking lot is, and kind of, I don't know, I guess a little bit of what you can do with it and this and that, because it's a pretty sweet parking lot, and there's a lot you could do there.
Let's take a look here, Producer Nick. Oh, yeah, look at that old school video.
Yes, that's what I'm talking about.
So you start up at the very top of this hill. That's actually the entrance to the parking lot.
Yep.
And so this massive parking lot and all the way kind of down to this big building, which they call the Lodge. It kind of looks like a hotel or a motel, but beautiful, beautiful building, but just a monster parking lot. Because, of course, your skiers are going to show up en masse every year.
Oh yeah.
What do you think? This has to be enough parking for, I don't know, 700 cars?
Oh, at least. Or more. I mean, it depends. Like, if you really wanted to, you could use kind of that entrance hill. And I mean, back where she started from, we weren't even really utilizing that area, and you could have stuffed that full too. Plus, you have right here where she's at, off to the right, you have all that kind of field area back there that you can park in and do stuff with as well.
And I know for the podcast listeners, you can't see it, but right now the car is facing another huge portion of the parking lot, equally as big as what was just being driven, where everybody is staged up and parked and cars are being worked on and stuff.
Yeah.
So that's actually this is a good video to kind of show
Really
what exactly
shows
is going
the
on.
whole parking lot.
Yeah.
That's what I liked about it.
And actually, for people watching the video, that starting point, if you look to your right, you can see where all of the tires were dumped that lost us Hoodoo.
Yeah.
Which was very cool.
Yeah, none of us were thrilled about that. I think there's a lot of people that are very angry about that. I know I'm one of those because I can't tell. I mean, well, look at the view. Look at the background.
Yeah.
I mean, come on. I mean, to be able to just sit there and you get to listen to all these car noises just echo through the canyon, and you got all these views. I mean, it's amazing.
It's
and then
kind
you
of
get
the high desert of Oregon, a little bit.
Yeah.
A little bit east, and yeah, just the trees, the mountains. It's a stunning view.
And not only that, so like the lodge and all of them, they had a huge fire pit set up behind the lodge that they would use, during the ski season.
All right, that's good, producer Nick.
So we would have a fire there every night, a huge fire. They were totally cool with it. They were like, yeah, use our fire pit, whatever wood you can find, go ahead, that's cool. And so, just 30 of us out there camping for 2 days around a huge fire, drifting, and it was awesome.
Man, I can't believe how easy it is to lose something that incredible.
Right? All you got to do is dump about 100 tires in the forest, and seems to really make people mad for good reason.
What in the world could somebody be thinking doing that? That just blows my mind.
I don't get it either, man.
They weren't thinking. I mean, that's just the long and short of it. Yeah. Well, that's a precursor to all of the drift that we see in Oregon. I mean, that was a really, really good start for you guys. And hopefully we're able to get it back. I know that the autocross folks have been, because it ruined it for all motorsports.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And I know that like that I didn't think about it till now, but that right there, I think was probably one of the biggest reasons why you guys and everyone else hated all the drifters.
That was part of it.
Because they got this awesome place ruined for everyone. And all everyone would talk about and think is, oh, when is this going to happen again? Oh, when are these idiots going to come over here and do this? And then it's going to ruin this for us, and it's going to ruin that. And then we're not going to have any motorsports in the state, And
exactly.
I kind of feel like that's where everyone's thought process was going at that time for good reason.
We were waiting for it, that's for sure.
Yeah, I'm just glad it didn't happen.
But then suddenly we find ourselves at Pat's Acres. This video is one of the early on ones, right?
Yeah, this is sometime in the first year of Pat's Acres. I think that the first few events and all that was probably still potato phone videos. This is like one of the earliest videos I can find of Jared Cosgrove. I'm not even sure if he's still filming or doing any of that anymore, but let's check it out.
I think he's still doing photog stuff.
I think he is. But this is one of the early park days.
Yeah, let's catch some of this, producer Nick. Good shots. Look at that. I recognize that RX-7.
Yes. And we have to point out how many 240s. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Toge Northwest.
Man,
I forgot. Forum days.
Completely forgotten about Toge Northwest. Wow.
Yeah. All the 240s on track.
And of course, a beautiful setting. Pat's Acres has that creek that runs behind it. Apparently, you can fish that some parts of the year, too.
That's what I've heard.
Really neat little track. Boy, it's quiet, though. There we go. Now we got some sound. Huh. Actually, I don't know if we want to play this music because that might get us copyright strikes. Folks listening to the podcast, though, yeah, lots of people really throwing it down. I mean, tons of tire smoke, lots of very early looking cars. I mean, that R33
Oh, yeah, that's just
right there.
That was like the typical park days back in the just your SR, RB 240, KA 240. I mean, that is 240s and RX-7s mostly.
And very few of the 240s have bumpers on them.
Yeah, typical. Especially back in that. That was like back in the drift missile days.
Yeah,
that's when drift missiles was cool.
It was cool to have a little tiny, the smallest zip ties you could get to put your stuff back on.
Oh, well, yeah, your bumper has to just perfectly fly off as soon as you barely touch something to look cool.
Exactly. I can't believe that was a fashion statement. Yeah, wow, these early days are crazy to watch. I know you guys, watching the video, you're seeing what's going on, but everybody that's listening into the podcast, we're going to have to link this on the bottom because you have got to go and watch this video.
Oh, yeah.
It's a great video, but man, look at how tight some of these corners are.
Yeah.
And people dropping a tire. There's mud dragged. Oh, and look at the grass thrown.
Yep.
I have no doubt, as cool a shot as that made, Chris was probably just like, you.
Oh, he was pulling his hair out, definitely.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, it wasn't him at that time. There was a older gentleman. I'm not sure if he still does the lawn care, but he was the guy that would do the lawn care, and he could get so mad because he did not like riding his mower over all of our car tracks. I know that would just make him so. And Chris was always like, we don't want to make him mad,
Yep. And I remember a few of these cars. I'm not going to point out which one, but there is one particular VQ swapped 240, and it was straight piped. And I think that was the first time everybody collectively realized, oh, you don't want to straight pipe those motors.
Yeah, Yeah, I remember the first time I heard that car, it was just like, what is that?
Yeah,
why would you do that? And this is horrible. That was like that all within 5 seconds. I think those three things went through my brain as soon as he took off from the line. I was just like, what is this?
Why does this make me want to tear my ears off? Some really beautiful cars there, though, I have to admit. I mean, the purple S13 coupe.
Yes, Nate Candle's car, SR20. That thing was one of the higher horsepower cars back in the day. I want to say it was 350 horse, but he was a high horsepower back then, I feel like. And then there's your VQ S13 Corolla.
Yeah, the AE86s.
Yep.
I've seen a few of those on here, and I think that's James Wickland's
No,
S13.
that is not. That is Jesus Fleets.
Oh.
Fleets, I think.
Oh, and photo of the busted rims.
Oh yeah, that's a typical thing, that I feel like you're not going to see at PARC anymore. Maybe we should talk about that a little bit. Is the first corner? If you drop a tire on the inside of the first corner, almost every time, if you do it just right, it'll rip the entire inside of your rim out. And so I know, especially early days, I feel like that had to do with a little bit of suspension setups, not having as much angle, things like that. That there was a lot of people that ruined rims at PARC, and expensive rims too.
A lot of people doing that. I remember that was just sort of a thing. Like, people would intentionally try to get close, but they knew if they got too close, that corner would bite back.
Yep, it was that dangerous game you were playing.
Yep. Wow, this is fascinating to watch. There's Cressida.
Yep.
Interesting. Nice slidey through. That's that
he was
corner
also
that you were
one
talking
of
about
the,
with that little bit of an elevation change. It's an on-camber corner.
Yep.
It goes up and then it dips back down, and it's kind of an unusual sensation for somebody that's used to drifting on the street.
It is. It's kind of fun because right after you come out of that corner, it has a quite large dip, and then it comes right back up again right on that straight stretch. It's kind of fun. It's almost a little roller coaster,
I like the fact that I just saw Justin Hunt, but he was not drifting. He was standing at a gate. You didn't see that very much.
No, you didn't. He was also one of those guys that was always in his car. Right there, Craig Alexander in his AE86. Man, you can't get that guy off track.
I have a great story with Craig. He broke his alternator mount one time at a Pat's Acres event. And, he was trying to figure out what to do. And he's a mechanical engineer, by the way.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, dude, I've got a whole box of zip ties.
Those were your zip ties? Oh, I didn't know.
Yeah.
Okay, he was parked next to me that day.
Yeah.
And I remember I came over and I was just like, what are you doing? And there's like 100 zip ties holding his alternator on.
You don't remember? I was on top, like pushing his alternator down to tension it. While
I think I was on track when you guys were doing that. I think I came off track like right towards the end of all that, and I was just like, "What is going on over here?"
He drifted the rest of the day like that.
Oh yeah, I mean his belt was a little squeaky, but whatever. I mean he made it through the day.
Not only did he drift the whole day, but he drove that thing home.
Yeah. Yep, he did. You were absolutely right.
Yeah, it's super funny. I talk to him once in a while. I'm like, hey, you remember the zip ties? And he's like, yes. I don't think that was his proudest moment, but I think it's hilarious.
Definitely not one of the other proudest moments, but he always got a good laugh out of it because he is older than all of us. And back then, we were way younger. I mean, back then it was like 21, 22-ish. And so he was, I want to say he was approaching on 30 at that time. And so I remember, and I want to say that it was that Hoodoo event that we had to go and we had to compete at to make it to PARC. We made a sticker that said Grandpa Craig on it. And when we were in the driver's meeting, someone distracted him and I snuck away and I went and put Grandpa Craig stickers on each side of his Corolla right under his door like a doorbell, like a name tag. And he was a champ about it. I was kind of surprised. I was like, oh man, these aren't going to last the whole event. And he actually left them on there for almost a year, I think, before he pulled them off. And I was like, dude, you're a champion for this. This is awesome.
What a hero.
Right?
Wow. That is so funny.
Yeah, it was pretty awesome.
That's crazy to look at those old videos. You know that? And
it
of
is.
course, we've got one more that we wanted to show. This is actually me chasing you. I was in my big turbo all-wheel drive Mazda, which was the most bizarre car I think you guys had ever seen out on that track. I remember the first time I showed up, and I remember a few people coming up to me and saying, hey, at first we were like, what is this guy even doing here? And I mean, that's part of the reason why I did what I did. I pulled onto the track kind of the wrong way, and then I clutch kicked my all-wheel drive car, and it skittered the whole thing sideways, and then I kind of shot it down the front straight and slammed on the brakes and stopped. And I had a few people tell me that's when they were like, oh, okay, that guy's here to run.
Yeah. I remember that because I want to say that you followed me for the first, I think this was one of the first few videos that we did. And I remember, there were so many people that were looking at me and asking me and this and that, like, oh, he's going to follow you, this and that. And it was pretty funny after that first couple times on track. They were like, oh, this thing's actually fast.
Well,
it's not just a four-door protege.
It's because drift cars aren't all that quick. But
yeah, this is true. But this thing here, so this is my current 1JZ S14 that was not my 1JZ S14 at the time. And
yeah, this was Matt Kendall's car, right?
Yeah, this time it was running reground 2J cams, like 20 or 25 PSI on the stock twin turbos. And we ran them like that for, I think, almost 2 or 3 years, and they didn't blow up.
Yeah, it made 400 horse for
I
years.
think it was like just short of 400, something like that is what it was supposed to be.
That is wild. Hit that play button, producer Nick. Oh, pause it. So you're going to hear 2 different engine sounds in this video.
Oh,
by the
yeah.
Because my car was not exactly quiet. All right, go ahead. The fisheye lens made it look like I was so far away.
I know.
But I was literally like 4 feet, 3 feet away from you. I was right on you.
Yeah, I remember all the camera guys were almost, like, some of them were like, hey, man, he's so close, we can't even get pictures of your car because he's in the picture. But then you watch this video and you're like, hey, why are you like 15 feet away?
Yeah, it was that first series GoPro video.
Yeah.
It looked so far away.
Yeah, that was back in the high quality days.
Oh, I didn't even think about the photographers must have been angry at me.
Oh, they were a little angry at you that day. But that was amazing, and I'm so glad we did all that and have some of these videos still. Because at that day and time, there wasn't a lot of video and a lot of content coming out.
Yeah, no, and by the way, I did, 3 of these events as a chase car, and then one of the pro photographers, they had a car that they brought to do chase with, but that was literally the same year that drones started becoming a thing.
Yeah, and then that kind of stopped.
Yeah, chase cars suddenly were obsolete. You didn't have to do it anymore.
Yep.
That's so funny. Oh my gosh. And this is going to sound bizarre, but one of the things that I remember, I learned that lesson the hard way. If I pulled off into the grass, it would kind of wet my tires. And so when I was chasing a person into the first corner, I would slide as well. I had a couple of those where I started sliding a little bit too much, and I was like, uh-oh, gather it back up.
Yeah.
And this is nothing against the, I won't say the name of the person, but there was a pro driver that I chased around the track at one point. And everybody said that he was a very nice guy. He was not particularly nice to me that day. You know, I was offering people, hey, can I chase your car? Do you want a chase cam? You know, and everybody seemed pretty cool about it. And then I walked over to this pro driver and I said, hey, do you want a chase cam? And he looked at me and he said, I guess if you can keep up. And that, of course, became a challenge. And it turned out it was not all that difficult to keep up with him.
No.
Yeah.
I mean, his car was faster than the rest, but you're still, I think you were making maybe 100 horsepower less than him, and you weren't spinning
I was
tires at
320 to the ground.
Oh, you were 320?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you were, 100, maybe 50 horse less than him, which is not that much when you're not spinning tires.
Yeah, exactly.
At all.
When you're not sliding sideways.
When you got an all-wheel drive Protege.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, that's so funny. What a weird trip back in time. You know that, Ryan?
It's crazy. It's every time I think back on this. So this picture here, that's actually from Packwood, from the last SmackDown event, and that was one of the wildest events I think I had. So we showed up, and let's be real, back in that day, there wasn't much for drift cars showing up. I was showing up more just to have fun in an open parking lot. Like, it wasn't a real competition and all that, at least for me, because I don't think there was another, like, actually full prep drift car there. There was, like, cars that could drift, but there was nothing that was like, okay, this is my drift car, except for what we had. And it was funny because we showed up, and you're in a warehouse, and I start the car, and that thing was angry when it was cold. So we're in a warehouse, and this thing starts up, and it just sounds like it has huge cams and all this, and everyone stopped what they're doing and is looking, all this. So we unload the car, and I could hear kind of murmur around like, oh, this is the drift kid. He knows how to drift, all this stuff. And so we go out and set up this track, and I help these guys set up all this track, and they're like, okay, will you run the track to see if it feels okay? And so I'm like, yeah, sure, why not? So we get in this, I get in the car, go pull up to the line. They're like, all right, just, go do your thing. And everyone was watching at this point. Everyone that was there had stopped what they were doing, is watching.
And can I just say, I mean, we're still talking about the early days of drift. So even though you had been doing it for a long time,
I hadn't been doing it that long.
Dude, longer than anybody else there. And I mean, you had people there that, as weird as it sounds, had really never seen like that up
Real
close and
drifting.
personal. Yeah, exactly.
And so, to say the least, people were pretty excited. And this 400 horsepower car that's loud that no one's ever seen before, just a lot of things that were going on at that time. And so I pull up to the line, and I'm like, oh man, here we go. Let's just do this. And so I'm not thinking anything, and I just take off the line. And I remember that every time I've ever driven that car, it pretty much hucks a little to the left when you slam second. And I remember it didn't do that. And I had set myself up to go, and as soon as it kicked in full boost, it would start kicking me to the left, and then I would transfer right into the right and go around the cone. Well, I remember it didn't do that. And so when it didn't transfer, I'm like, oh, what the heck? And so I just had to do this quick, weird movement, and I ripped the e-brake, and I remember I clutch kick in, and it didn't do anything. And I'm like, and at this time, I mean, I'd never driven a car with this much horsepower, for one. This is the most horsepower I'd ever driven. And thank you, Matt. And so I didn't really know what had happened. I'd never broken axles before. And so I'm just like, I don't know. There's no power in the car. And so we pull it back in, and all these people, like, I have never seen so many mad people. Like, I felt like the biggest turd there, like, seriously, because it was just like all this hype, oh, the drifter kid and all this stuff. And then I literally go out and blow up 2 axles. And most of the people there didn't even know what happened, because they're just off on the side kind of doing their thing. And so we show up, and then my car's broken, And so to continue with the story, Matt starts calling his dad, and his dad just happened to be like an hour away from us in Washington that day. And he goes, oh, yeah, there's actually a junkyard here, and they have 240 axles. What are the chances? So he drives out, gets these axles, and brings them to us. And by the time he had gotten there, they had come up to me and said, okay, you got a half an hour before you can go on track and the drifting's done. And like, this is the only reason I came is for drifting. And I didn't even get to do the drift portion at this point because it had gone almost all day. And basically we had made no points for our team because I didn't go out there and win like I was supposed to. And so I'm feeling pretty bad. And I remember Matt's dad shows, they say, okay, you got a half an hour to get on track. And there's a diff sitting on the ground, axles, like everything's out of the car, and we're waiting.
Yeah.
And so I remember I call Matt. We call his dad. He's like, I'm almost there. He shows up. And in 15 minutes, we put the diff in, put the axles on. And I remember I'm sitting in the car, like, just strapping helmets on because I knew we had, like, no time. I think by the time I got to the line, it was like 5 minutes or something.
Well, I don't know if you knew this, but Coy was actually filibustering for you guys.
Oh, he definitely was. Coy was playing the biggest crowd hype and the biggest everything because we were, like, making something happen that shouldn't happen at an event like this.
Well, not only that, but they were just saying, nope, you're out of time. Mm-hmm. You think you got there with 5 minutes to spare? Maybe there was 5 minutes to spare, but they were like, nope, they're not going to make it, so we're done. We're shutting this thing down.
Yeah.
And Coy was working.
Oh, yeah.
Working so hard.
I have never seen someone hype a crowd and people so much for a car that didn't even matter, for someone that no one even knew. No. I had never met any of these people before. Like, none of it, but it was amazing. And so I remember I was sitting in the car as they were putting the wheels on, as I'm putting my helmet on and all this stuff and all these things. And then I remember they dropped the car down and I just drive right out of the warehouse and I go out there and we killed it the rest of the weekend. 5 laps, just smoking out the whole track and all that. And of course, we got first place.
Oh,
it was a prep drift car.
But hold on, that first time out, like when you actually got to the line, went out, I remember that thing came blasting up to the line. You like slammed on the brakes and stopped, which kind of pissed the guy off that was flagging.
Yeah, he was so mad. He was angry at us.
All those guys were angry pretty much all the time.
You remember that so that car could only make it about 2 1/4 laps before it would overheat.
Yes.
And that guy was like, you have to do 5 laps right now or you don't get any points. And we're going to disqualify you. And I'm like, listen here, I can only do 2 laps at a time. And he's like, well, figure it out. And so I remember they went over and we got a spray bottle and literally Coy was hyping up the crowd to the point of distracting the guy because he was angry. To the point where I was literally like slow rolling, like they were pushing my car forward from like the end of the line to like the start line as my girlfriend at the time was spraying my radiator with water because this dude was so angry. And I remember as soon as I get up there, start your car, go. Like, I mean, he was just so angry. I'm just like, what do you want me to do, man? It is what it is.
No, it's 1,000 degrees outside. He's getting sunburnt, like all of that. But at the same time, listen, there's an allotted time. We're still within that allotted time.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Like, if you're that angry, have someone relieve you of your position.
Yeah, exactly.
That was my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, because let's be real, it wasn't a serious enough event that one dude needed to stand there and do that.
Yeah.
You know,
by
any means.
Speaking of, well, so I want to finish this thought before we do that. So, yeah, you go out there, absolutely crush it. I mean, I think it was your final run. Does Coy have his shirt? No, he doesn't have his shirt off. He's swinging something around, though.
I don't remember. I think
you come sliding in, though, and you are doing the fattest rolling burnout, brakes on, rolling burnout right past the crowd, and Coy's just out there swinging something around. And he's just like, yeah, give it up. It was so funny.
Yeah.
What an epic moment. I mean, you must have felt, well, I don't know how you felt, but like in that moment, all eyes were on you, and you were just you were cording those tires. You were like, we're done for the day.
Oh,
so just,
yeah. That was probably one of the best feelings ever. I'm not gonna lie, because how many times do you get to just throw a car together last minute like that and have it work out, you know?
And have a huge crowd of people.
Oh, yeah,
just
and everyone's standing there
out.
waiting for me. Like, this is weird. Yeah, it's definitely weird. But it was such a good time. I remember that whole event was so cool. Even riding, some of those autocross cars. I remember there was one guy that had like an old like Datsun 510.
Yeah.
I think he said it had like 68 horsepower.
Yeah.
And it seriously was like the fastest car out there. And I remember it was like, how is this guy getting such fast times? Like, it even doesn't look fast out on the track necessarily. And
it was a B210, by the way.
Is that what it was?
Yeah, because it was a hatchback.
Yep.
In Japan, they called them the Sunny, but here in the States, it was a Datsun B210.
Okay.
Don't forget, it had box flares and 315 width tires.
Yeah, I mean, that's minor details. But I remember, I remember that guy came up to me and he goes, look, I've never seen drifting before. This is amazing. This is awesome. My daughter really wants to ride in your car. Can she ride in your car? And I was like, only if you give me a ride in that Datsun.
Yep.
Because usually that guy doesn't give people rides. He doesn't like people riding in his car, this and that. And I'm like, I want to ride in that thing because I don't know how the heck you're doing what you're doing. And so he's like, all right, that's fine. And so I remember I went out and I linked their entire autocross course, which all the autocross... I remember I came up to him and I was like, hey, can I drift your autocross course? Because they had it set up and they were out there practicing. And they're like, sure, just don't hit any cones. And I remember there were a couple specifically were they like professional like race guys there, and they were pretty pissed about it. And they were like, oh, what, you're going to let him do? No. And I'm like, whatever, I'm doing it anyways. And so I went out there and didn't hit a single cone. And I remember we showed up for the next day for the actual autocross. And when I did the autocross, I remember, man, I locked eyes with that guy that was being super angry. He was out on course working. And I remember, I've never seen a dude's jaw drop so far. He was just like, how is this piece of crap 400 horse car with barely any tires on it making it through the course like this? And so, like, I know it's pretty cool for me, definitely.
Yeah. You were showing a lot of people up.
Yeah.
That's what that entire event was about, though, was we had our little faux street team that was actually a mock street team. But for whatever reason, we ended up with a collection of really, really good drivers. And so we would always show up, and we got third like 3 years in a row or 4 years in a row until they finished doing the SmackDown. And it was because we didn't have enough people to fill out all of the points. So it was just kind of one of those funny things, like if we'd had 4 or 5 more drivers, then we probably would have done a lot better. But anyways, that's one of the reasons why I was just tired of the whole thing and I didn't want to go back after the third year, was the attitudes were so poor.
Oh, yeah.
But producer Nick...
But we definitely need some of that, though.
I think it was Jake Jaden. He posted a link. Was that on the other tab?
What is that?
What is that?
Is that...
Open that up. Let's take a look.
Is that Justin Hunt or is that James? Or who is that? That's James. Oh, that's you chasing James. So that's how close you are. Okay, there you go.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it looks like you're about 15 feet away, but like clearly you're not that far. Well, maybe you are, I guess, 15 feet, but you're pretty close right there.
Yeah. Yeah, right there. I mean, I'm close up on you. That was one of the early ones, though. I didn't really know how close I was supposed to get to these cars.
I remember that. And then I remember when you came up, I want to say that you had done maybe 3 or 4 chases at that point, and I remember I came up and talked to you. I was like, "How's it going?" And I remember you had said something to me like, "Well, I don't know, how close am I supposed to get, and this and that." And I'm like, "Go for it." I mean, you're not gonna hit anyone. You're gonna stop faster than they are.
That video with Justin Hunt that you're talking about. I don't know, producer Nick. See if you can find it real quick on YouTube.
I think it's video 5.
Is it video 5?
Yeah. Pretty sure. Type in, just go to his TEQNYCK. Yeah, just type. There you go.
Yeah. But here's the thing: you can kind of, sort of. It's like breaking.
Nick. It's top right. It's been played already. The minute 30. Yep, that one.
Oh, is that the one?
Yep, that's the.
Oh yeah. That is the one.
Yep. This is another great clip of SR20.
Does that have any audio?
Nope.
I think YouTube's muted. No? Oh, that's weird. Yep, she was muted. Boy, he hit a real sweet spot with that car, too. I mean, it made just enough power to where he could pretty much just mat it and then swing the steering wheel.
I also don't hate me, Justin Hunt, if I'm wrong, but I want to say that he was not running super big tires at that time either. I think he was running some 15s or 16s, and so that definitely helped. But he was also, I want to say that he was one of the, not the first one, but he was one of the few guys that had angle mods at that time. there wasn't a lot of cars out there that had like actual real modified knuckles or whatever. Usually it was just like you pull some steering stops and you add some tie rod spacers at 240s and you get a little more angle. But he had actually modded knuckles at that time.
But I mean, the way he's able to, oh yeah, you're right, because he was spun out right there and then caught it. But the way he was able to smoke out the entire track up there again.
Amazing.
See? Yeah.
Yeah, it's awesome.
It just kind of was this perfect, I don't know, this perfect thing. There's another video of his that I feel like really shows off the effect of that fisheye lens, because you can tell we're not going very fast. But
do the V8 S13. That's
V8
me
S13.
driving Derek's car with no power steering. So this here is a VH45 S13 with no power steering at the time.
Ooh.
Yeah, it was quite interesting to drive. I think you get pretty close on this one too because it was me driving.
I might have. It wasn't until we reviewed some of the footage.
And this is definitely the end of the day because you can see the sun starting to set. Maybe you weren't.
No,
close.
I'm far away from you guys.
I lied.
This first event, I tried to really be careful with you guys. I didn't want to hit anybody.
I know, right? You don't want to be that guy.
Yeah. But, after we watched the footage and I realized what it looked like, I was like, oh, no, I got to be right up on you.
Oh, yeah. And I, at this point in time, I want to say that either this was the only one or there was maybe one other V8 car at PARC at this time, but this was one of the early V8 swaps. I remember when he was doing this and we were all talking about it, and it was like, that was early days of LS swaps and all that.
Was this an LS?
No, this is a VH45.
Yeah. Because I remember him having the Q45.
Yeah, that's this motor.
Yeah. That was actually a lot of fun, that Q45 before he swapped it, because he would do like a drift taxi thing with that car.
Oh, yeah. Streets of Mexico stories. Yeah. I remember there was a day when he first got that car and he loaded it with 4 people and we went out and hit some sketchy back roads, and I was just like, I don't know what you're doing with that huge car, but this is sketchy and amazing at the same time. Like, it was
so funny.
So wild.
So funny. Go back to, there you go. I am not.
Which one are you looking for?
Oh, I'm not seeing it now. There was one in particular. It was one with Justin Hunt where his tire delaminates right in front of him.
That was the video we already watched. That was the smoking problems. That's right at the end.
I don't remember seeing it.
You missed it, but it was there.
I must have. Okay, yeah. That I felt like that was a really good indicator
you could skip
of how
to the end of
close
that
you are.
video, Nick. It's the top right PARC 7. Yep. The one we already watched, far right. Yep, and then skip to the end. Yeah, somewhere right there. Right. Oh, we missed it. It was
I don't know, man. I'm not seeing it.
I'm pretty sure it's this one. Hang on. I'm pretty sure it's this video.
I'm sorry, people listening on audio. We're going back through this. I don't.
Oh, maybe.
Yeah,
right.
I don't think so. I think it's a different one that I don't have titled correctly. Let's see the Kyle Pollard one, just because. There you go.
This
car's
I want to say 500 horse SR or 450 horse SR, something like that, or 550 maybe.
He was one of the first guys out here. I mean, he was the pro, I use air quotes, pro driver, but he had Falcon RT615Ks all the way around. And do you remember when people would look at that and they'd just be like, you were running race tires all the way around on that?
Oh, yeah, I remember all that.
And he was burning through sets, like set after set after set.
I think what I remember about this car the most, and it's funny because, like, he was like, yeah, I don't know, there's just a bunch of cheap parts on this thing, like Megan Racing, exhaust manifold, and whatever, but it sounded so unique for an SR. And I really, really liked the way it sounded.
And it ran hard.
Oh, yeah. Thing ripped.
I didn't really have a problem keeping up with it, but but I mean, it was quick. For what it was a quick car out there.
I think if you would have had a few more runs behind him, it would have been a little different, because I think the way his car would pick up speed versus a lot of our cars at that time was a lot different. And so I think going from chasing the slower cars to the faster car played with you a little bit for sure.
That could have been. Wow, wild times, man. Ryan, I think it's time for us to wrap this little trip down memory lane up, but I appreciate you going through kind of your earliest memories of Oregon drifting.
I appreciate you being here with me and sharing definitely some of these stories, because you and a lot of others were there for the beginning of all of this, and whether some people know it or not, they got stories. They got stories to tell, and personally, I want to hear them. I want to talk about them, because I'll tell you what, there's nothing that gets me more excited than talking about the early days of PARC.
Yep. That's a fact. Nothing gets me more excited than talking about some of these early days of when we were just trying to figure out what was going on.
Oh, yeah, we had no idea what we were doing or what was going on or how to do any of this stuff, whether it was build cars or anything. You know, and see, I think that's where a lot of people, you know, it's different for people, is where like we thought we knew what we were doing and we just tried our hardest and, you know, all of that. It's not to say that we didn't mess up, and there's not tons of things that I've done that I'm like, whoa, I'm never talking about that, or I'm, you know what I mean? I mean, everyone has those, but it's all about where you go from there and what you do with it, you know? And I feel like that right there is the biggest thing and the biggest difference between some of the people in the drift community, you know, because drifting's not all glorious. I'll tell you, it's not fun building your car all the time, breaking it, this and that. It's not always fun, but, you know, it's all about where you go from there and what you do with it.
Yeah. Well, and that's why on a future episode, we're going to be talking about some of the most reliable ways to build your drift car.
Oh,
but that is
definitely
a topic for the future. Hey, thank you, my friend, for being here and doing it.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you guys for tuning in. Thanks for telling a friend about this show. We really do appreciate it, and we rely on you. Check us out at Clutch Kick Radio on Facebook and Instagram. The website's going to be coming around real soon. Check us out on Twitch at Boost Booze BBQ, on YouTube under at Boost Booze BBQ, and of course everywhere else that it's shared. And give us your earliest memories of drifting underneath this episode, okay?
Definitely. And if
Thanks
you guys
so
want
much.
to be on the show and tell your early drifting day stories, go ahead and shoot us a message, and we'll schedule a time, see what we can do.
Absolutely, you guys. So for Ryan, producer Nick, and everybody else, this is Andy. We will see you next time.